Welcome to News Hour by DLC, your one-stop destination for the latest and most impactful updates from the legal world. From landmark rulings to policy shifts shaping the justice system, DLC brings you in-depth coverage, expert insights, and analysis that matter. Stay informed, stay ahead because in law, every verdict counts. Today is 20th February 2025 and we bring you news that matters. The first news for today is as follows. In a recent ruling, the Supreme Court of India elucidated the distinctions between common intention under Section 34 and common object under Section 149 of the Indian Penal Code, IPC. The bench comprising Justices J.B. Pardiwala and R. Mahadevan emphasized that Section 34 necessitates active participation and a shared intention among individuals committing a crime. Conversely, Section 149 holds members of an unlawful assembly collectively liable for offences committed in pursuit of a common objective, irrespective of individual intent. The case in question involved a husband and his mother accused of setting the wife ablaze over alleged dowry demands. While the mother directly perpetrated the act, the husband was present but did not partake actively. Instead, he attempted to extinguish the flames. The court acquitted the husband, noting the absence of evidence indicating his active participation or shared intent, thereby underscoring that mere presence at a crime scene does not constitute common intention. This judgment delineates the legal thresholds for collective liability under the IPC, clarifying that active involvement is crucial for establishing common intention, whereas mere association with an unlawful assembly suffices for common object liability. Next news. In a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court of India has acquitted a man accused of kidnapping a minor girl for marriage, emphasizing that the girl had voluntarily accompanied him and lived as his wife. The bench comprising Justices B.R. Gavai and K. Vinod Chandran highlighted that prosecution failed to establish the essential elements of taking or enticing a minor away from her lawful guardian, leading to the acquittal. The case originated from allegations that the appellant, along with his father and relatives, had kidnapped the girl in February 1994. Subsequent investigations revealed that she was residing with appellant in Denton. While the trial court convicted the appellant under sections 363, 366, and 376 of the Indian Penal Code (IPC), the High Court later acquitted him of the rape charge but upheld convictions for kidnapping-related offences, sentencing him to 2 years imprisonment. Upon appeal, the Supreme Court noted inconsistencies in the girl's testimony. Initially, she claimed abduction, however, during cross-examination, she admitted to willingly accompanying the appellant, traveling with him, and consenting to marriage in Denton. She also acknowledged making no attempt to raise an alarm during their journey. Given conflicting evidence regarding her age, the court extended the benefit of the doubt to the accused. The judgment underscores the necessity of proving taking or enticing in kidnapping cases, especially when the individual involved is close to the age of majority and has acted voluntarily. This ruling provides clarity on the interpretation of consent and coercion in cases involving young individuals. Next news. In a significant ruling on February 19, 2025, the Supreme Court of India clarified the circumstances under which a second First Information Report (FIR) can be registered. The bench, comprising Justices Sanjay Karol and Prashant Kumar Mishra, emphasized that while multiple FIRs for the same offence are generally impermissible, there are specific exceptions where subsequent FIRs are allowed. The court outlined key scenarios permitting a second FIR. Counter-complaints. When the second FIR serves as a counter-complaint or presents a rival version of evidence related to an already registered FIR. Different scope. When the two FIRs, though arising from the same circumstances, have different scopes or ambits, uncovered larger conspiracy when investigations reveal that the initial FIR is part of a broader conspiracy not previously identified. New facts emerge. When new, previously unknown facts or circumstances come to light during the investigation. Separate incidents when the subsequent FIR pertains to a separate incident, regardless of whether the offences are similar or different. This clarification came during the court's examination of an appeal by the state of Rajasthan against a High Court decision that had quashed a second FIR involving a biofuel authority official accused of bribery. The Supreme Court observed that the High Court erred by not considering the distinct nature of allegations in the second FIR, which pertained to a broader bribery scheme involving multiple individuals. Consequently, the Supreme Court set aside the High Court's judgment, reinstating the second FIR and directing a prompt investigation. This ruling delineates the legal boundaries for registering multiple FIRs, ensuring that distinct offences or revelations during investigations are appropriately addressed within the judicial framework. Next news. In a pivotal move, the Supreme Court of India has initiated a suo motu case to examine the jurisdictional boundaries or the Lokpal concerning High Court judges. This action follows the 27th of January 2025 decision by the Lokpal, led by former Supreme Court Justice A.M. Kanvilkar, asserting its authority to entertain complaints against High Court judges. The Lokpal's stance is based on the interpretation that High Courts established by Parliamentary Acts fall within the purview of Section 14(1) F or the Lokpal and Lokayuktas Act, 2013. The Supreme Court's special bench, comprising Justices B.R. Gavai, Suryakant, and Abhay S. Oka, is set to deliberate on this matter, focusing on the delicate balance between judicial independence and accountability. This development underscores the ongoing discourse on the extent of the Lokpal's oversight over the judiciary, particularly concerning High Court judges. The Supreme Court's intervention aims to provide clarity on this jurisdictional issue, ensuring that principles of judicial independence are upheld while addressing mechanisms for accountability. Next news. On February 19, 2025, a 5-judge Constitution bench of the Supreme Court of India reserved its judgment on whether appellate courts possess the authority to modify arbitral awards under Sections 34 and 37 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, 1996. The bench, led by Chief Justice Sanjeev Khanna, and comprising Justices B.R. Gavai, Sanjay Kumar, K.V. Vishwanathan, and Augustine George Massey, deliberated on the extent of judicial intervention permissible in arbitration matters. Section 34 of the Act outlines the procedure for applying to set aside an arbitral award, while Section 37 specifies the circumstances under which appeals against certain orders, including those related to setting aside awards, are maintainable. The central issue before the bench was whether these provisions empower courts not only to annul but also to alter the content of arbitral awards. During the proceedings, Chief Justice Khanna highlighted that the Arbitration Act incorporates corrective mechanisms within its framework, such as Sections 33 and 34(4), to address potential issues in a one-step adjudication model, like arbitration. He remarked, "Arbitration is a one-step adjudication. The legislature's intent is to ensure that even if it's a one-step adjudication, there should be corrective measures available to the parties." Senior advocate Saurabh Kirpal contended that the power to set aside an award does not inherently include the power to modify it. He argued that Indian jurisprudence distinguishes between these concepts, noting that previous legislation, such as the Arbitration Act of 1940 and provisions in the Civil Procedure Code, separately addressed modification and setting aside of judgments. Justice Sanjay Kumar questioned whether the absence of the term modification in the 1996 Act should be deemed significant, especially since certain aspects of the 1940 Act appear to have been integrated into the current legislation. Kirpal responded by emphasizing that traditionally, modification and setting aside are viewed as distinct legal actions. The bench's forthcoming decision is poised to clarify the scope of judicial intervention in arbitral awards, potentially impacting the balance between arbitration autonomy and judicial oversight in India. Next news. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court of India has clarified that a dowry demand is not a prerequisite for constituting the offence of cruelty under Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code, IPC. The court emphasized that this provision addresses two distinct forms of cruelty: physical or mental harm. Willful conduct likely to drive a woman to commit suicide or cause grave injury to her physical or mental health. Harassment related to unlawful demands, harassment with the intent to coerce a woman or her relatives into meeting unlawful demands for property or valuable security. The court noted that while these forms of cruelty can coexist, the absence of a dowry demand does not preclude the application of Section 498A in cases where physical or mental harassment is evident. The essence of the offense lies in the act of cruelty itself, not solely in the demand for dowry. This clarification came during the court's examination of a case where the appellant alleged physical abuse by her husband and his relatives. The High Court had previously quashed the proceedings, citing the absence of a dowry demand. However, the Supreme Court overturned this decision, underscoring that demonstrated acts of physical violence and mental distress are sufficient to invoke Section 498A irrespective of any dowry-related allegations. This judgment reinforces the legal understanding that cruelty, in any form, against a married woman, is punishable under Section 498A IPC, independent of dowry considerations. Next news. In a recent directive, the Allahabad High Court has mandated that the Bar Council would obtain police reports on the criminal histories of applicants before granting licenses to practice law. This measure aims to prevent individuals with criminal backgrounds from entering the legal profession. The court emphasized the necessity of due diligence, noting that applicants with undisclosed criminal cases have previously secured licenses, posing potential risks to society and the legal community. The Bar Council is instructed to implement a time-bound police verification process for all pending and new applications, ensuring that any provisional licenses issued can be revoked upon receipt of adverse reports. And the final news for today is as follows. In a recent directive, the Punjab and Haryana High Court has mandated that the Enforcement Directorate (ED), when acting as the investigating agency, is responsible for providing comprehensive details of an appellant's custody period in applications seeking suspension of sentence. The bench, comprising Chief Justice Sheel Nagu and Justice Sumit Goel, emphasized that the prosecuting agency opposing such appeals must furnish all pertinent information regarding the duration of custody both during the under-trial phase and post-conviction. This ruling arose during the hearing of an application filed by Subhash Bajaj, convicted in a money laundering case, where the EDSS response lacked specifics about the custody period undergone by the appellant. Thanks for listening and consider subscribing to the channel. Well, that's all for today. Keep listening to Legal News by DLC.